Arts Museum is really pleased to close out our second season of Fresh Talks with our wonderful speakers tonight. I am always pleased to say that our initiative here is made possible through leadership gifts from Denise Littlefield-Sobel, who I'm going to see tomorrow in New York to report on how great things went this evening, Lorna Meyer-Callis and Dennis Callis, the M.L. Dowray Arts Initiative, and the Swartz Foundation. And by the way, most of these funders are from the West Coast, but because they believe in the program we do so much, they actually fund us here on the East Coast. Additional support for these programs are provided by the Bernstein Family Foundation here in Washington, also Marcia and Frank Carlucci, Deborah G. Karstens, the Ray and Dagmar Dolby Family Fund, and the Riva and David Logan Foundation. Before I end my remarks tonight, I'd first of all like to thank Alicia Gregory for all the work that she put in. Along with a wonderful cadre of volunteers who really did make this evening possible, as Lori Mertes, our Director of Public Programs, has been in Miami for the last several weeks. I'm in denial, which is obviously, as you know, a river in Egypt, but Lori helped me some 4 years ago, begin to think about what women, arts, and social change could be at the National Museum of Women in the Arts. She was our first public programs director, and she has gone on to go home to Miami to be the new executive director of Locust Projects, which is Miami's oldest and most august alternative space. And so while I obviously wish her well, she no longer has she now has hot water in her house, which is a good thing for all of us, and there are no tadpoles in the surrounding areas of her house. But she has moved to Miami. She's come back tonight for this program, and on behalf of the museum, the board, and staff, I can tell you I have board members and other staffers who are still crying over the fact that she is leaving us, but I promise you that we will try to find a worthy replacement as the Director of Public Programs here at the museum. But that will be a very hard act to follow. So in the realm of I don't have bread and salt for her, which I guess is what you normally give to people who are moving to a new place, but I do have the following. The best wine bag ever. From the museum shop, thank you very much. And a great bottle of Veuve Clicquot. That's number one. Present number two is a silver replica wine coaster that also is with Nimwa's logo, so she never forgets us when she drinks wine. And then finally, because Florida is very colorful, the proper kind of bouquet. So thank you again to Lori, and thank you to all of you who have made Lori's and my work on this project so valuable to us. It really has been a labor of love for both of us, and we thank you all for joining us in this enterprise. So we'll just put that down.
Should we put him right here in front of the speaker? Oh, thank you. Oh my gosh. Okay. Parting gifts. Don't let this go anywhere. You know, to whoever my successor will be, I have to tell you, it is pretty darn cool to have a gig where you can turn your geek hobbies into a public program. So it truly has been a great honor to have served as the architect of the Women, Arts, and Social Change. Okay, Susan, thanks for that. And focus on building something totally unique within the walls of an art museum. We're addressing issues and ideas that couldn't be more relevant to the times we live in, and thank you, Susan Fisher-Sterling, for your vision that inspired this public program initiative and the opportunity to work with a really fantastic team. So Fresh Talk, to get to the business at hand, is the signature program of the Women Arts and Social Change Initiative, and it's all about posing questions. We're not about the answers. You all of us have the ability to help work on these issues that are at hand and to help raise some creative solutions. These are all about convening fresh voices who bring new perspectives and broaden the dialogue on how women and the arts can be a catalyst for social change. When we launched this program in October 2015, we also introduced a unique concept of Sunday suppers. How many of you have been to a Sunday supper? Did you have a good time? Yeah. And if you haven't, you need to come. And also the Catalyst Cocktail Hour, which you will all get to partake in later this evening, to expand the ways in which you, the audience, get to participate in the content and the conversation that starts here. I'm immensely grateful to have shared these past 2 years, 3 years almost, here at the museum, but 2 years worth of programming, to experience this journey with you and hear your ideas that you have brought to our communal table and to the conversation at the cocktail. Tonight, we are talking about the new wave of superwomen in the comic universe who are leading the fight for justice and dispelling traditional stereotypes for women in fiction and beyond. When we planned this program a year ago, we did not anticipate that we would have as our backdrop the release of Wonder Woman, directed by a woman, as an adding rich inspiration and dimension to this program, and I'm sure we'll hear a little bit about that. We have with us today women who are actively contributing to shifting the dialogue about who and what we see in the pantheon of characters that inhabit the comic universe. Each of them are speakers or super in their own right, and they include Carolyn Coca, who you see in the upper right-hand corner, along with her superheroes, the author of Superwomen, Gender, Power, and Representation that was published last fall. We also have with us Arielle Johnson, the owner of Amalgam Comics and Coffee House in Philadelphia, who's featured here on a cover of an Iron Man Marvel comic. You also have with us Gabby Rivera of Marvel's new series starring America Chavez, a queer Latina superhero. And Gabby is also the author of a critically acclaimed young adult novel called Juliet Takes a Breath. We also have with us Ashley Woods, who worked with Amanda Stenberg, who you may remember from The Hunger Games, to create Niobe, She is Life, and illustrates a new series that was just released this spring called Lady Castle. And then we have our moderator, Emily Witten, whose day job is a mild-mannered senior attorney for the federal government. We think is surely her superhero cover for her identity as a superhero. And so, after the Fresh Talk happens, our folks are gonna come up here and give a presentation. They're going to all get on the stage, have a conversation, and then after the conversation, you and our speakers will all come together for the Catalyst Cocktail Hour with a topic and a twist. Here's how it works. As you enter, leave this room, you're going to go down to the Great Hall. You're going to be handed a card with a number on it corresponding to a tabletop card. And you're going to go there because you follow instructions well. And there you are going to be invited to create your own super character to add to the comic universe. In addition to those tabletop activities, you'll have a chance to shop at our pop-up shop, where, thanks to Arielle and Amalgam, and also DC's own Phantom Comics, we have a limited number, sadly limited, of copies of the speakers' books and some of their comics and publications for you all to purchase, shameless ad. And I understand that they are also willing to sign copies. And this is a really special opportunity, and we thank you all in advance for that. Tonight's specialty cocktail is the Golden Lasso. Be careful, for one too many, and the truth will come out. We also have DC Zine Fest with us tonight, who is featuring locally made zines for sale, and then info on this weekend, June 15th Zine Fest, where zine makers, self-published artists, and writers share their works with each other. And of course, you can keep the conversation going this weekend at AwesomeCon at the Convention Center, which is celebrating all aspects of geek culture, from comic books, sci-fi, fantasy, horror, anime, gaming, etc. And I hope to see you all there, at least in your Instagram feeds, if I can't be with you. So without further ado, I'm going to tell you about our hashtag, Fresh Talk for Change. We hope that you share that widely and loudly. Our museum's tag and handle is @WomenInTheArts. And we really want to hear from you and your thoughts. Feel free to use your phones, keep them on silent, but we want you to really talk about what you're seeing tonight and things that are really moving you and capturing your imagination. We're going to get our super geek on. Please join me in welcoming our speakers. First, starting with Carolyn, who's going to give their and then our other speakers will give their presentation, and then the group moderation on the stage. Let's get started. Carolyn.
So, thank you. I'm delighted to be here. These two pictures, a typical movie poster and a critique of it, pretty much sum up what my work is about. In short, female superhero characters are much less numerous, much more often stereotyped, much more often sexualized, and much less likely to drive the action than their male counterparts. They're also mostly white, cisgender, non-queer, and non-disabled. So my work examines how and why this is the case and how it's changed over the last 75 years. I look at the broader social and political context of a given time period and how comics were produced and distributed during that time. I look at whether there were corresponding novels or TV shows or movies, and the interplay of editors and writers and artists and parent companies and different audience groups about a specific female character. And all of that together explains why a superhero is the way she is in a particular moment. There are certain patterns by decade. So in the 1940s, comics were sold on newsstands, so they had to appeal to a very broad audience. Women's contributions to the war effort were celebrated, and men as well as women at that time wrote and drew female characters that were independent and strong. But after the war, women were forced out of men's jobs and into a cult of domesticity. So then in 1950s and 60s comics, all of these white, upper middle class, slim and curvy, and able-bodied female superheroes became very interested in domestic tasks and motherhood, and they were generally swooning over men like Wonder Woman there on the right, and like Jean Grey and Sue Storm, who faint when they use their powers too much. So on the one hand, great, there are female superheroes, and that just in and of itself challenges the idea that women are weak and subordinate, but on the other hand, as written and drawn almost entirely by white non-queer men, they're a very small minority of mainstream superheroes then, and they're all similar looking and portrayed pretty stereotypically. And being so few in number, they have to carry that impossible weight of representing all women. In the later 60s and 70s and into the 80s, as second wave feminism became more prominent, some well-meaning and probably some not so well-meaning male creators at DC and Marvel Comics introduced some feminism into their characters, but it was really more of a caricature of feminism. It was sort of anti-male and also very interested in fashion and romance with men, like Batgirl over on the right, who has a PhD and a brown belt in judo, but she stops fighting a criminal to check her face. And Wonder Woman gives up her powers to be with her boyfriend, who then dies, and so she cries over him a lot and opens a fashion boutique and then cries over a bunch of other guys for about 5 years. You also had team books at that time, and on team books then, and this mostly remains true today, there's usually one bathing-suited woman and several men. The 1970s, 80s X-Men were something of an exception. They generally had more than one female superhero on a team, and some differences of age and race and ethnicity and body type, but they had stereotypes too. Like Storm, who is African, controlled the weather, but she lost control of that if she got emotional. Or the Chinese-American Jubilee had fireworks powers. You get the idea. In general, female superheroes of color were less central to the action, less powerful, and more exoticized and sexualized than the white females. The black characters were more likely to have animalistic powers, like Vixen here, or they might be written and drawn as caregiving mammies or sexy Jezebels or angry sapphires. Asian female superheroes were much less common than dragon lady supervillains, like Lady Shiva. They were usually martial arts experts, and supporting characters were often like submissive China dolls or sexy geisha girls. There weren't really any South Asian or Middle Eastern or Latina characters in the mainstream superhero media, so what you really had was stereotypes and erasure of different groups of women of color. Now, in the 1980s and 90s, mainstream comics changed pretty drastically. They were increasingly being sold in comic shops instead of on newsstands. Companies raised their prices and they stressed high sales of superhero media, and the comics code that governed content was loosened. So all of this really homogenized the comics fan base. It became older and more male and more white, and that coincided with a backlash against civil rights movements and against feminism. So what you get is male artists drawing hypersexualized female characters with unnatural proportions and poses and inapparently magic fabrics. By contrast, male characters would face front, fully clothed, with a focus on their physical strength. Females were more often drawn from the side, wearing less, and with a focus on their TNA. Male characters weren't and aren't drawn like female characters because it looks absurd. But the thing is, with the female characters, we're used to it because we've now seen it over and over and over. And if you can see both curves of a character's behind and both of her breasts at the same time, such that her back would have to be broken to pose that way, then she's failed the broke back test. Which brings more attention to their curves, of course, than their strength, more to their sexuality than their athleticism. Male characters are never posed broke back. And parodies make it clear how ridiculous the pose and the clothes are. There's just no narrative reason for these things, nor is there any reason to make a female character a quote-unquote sexy lamp. That's when she's so superfluous to the action that she could be replaced by a sexy lamp, and the plot would function just as well. It's when she's more eye candy than hero, when only parts of her body are shown, like these here. And narratively, a female may as well be a sexy lamp if the story she's in doesn't pass the Bechdel test. In other words, are there at least two named characters who speak to one another about something other than a man? It's a very low bar, but most superhero media fail. Another plot device that female characters have suffered is called fridging, because this guy here opened his fridge to find his dead girlfriend in it. It's a trope in which violence is done to a female character in order to explore the effect of that violence on a male character. So what you get when you put all this together is stereotypes and broken backs and sexy lamps and not passing the Bechdel test and fridgings. They're all long-standing narrative devices that portray women as one-dimensional objects rather than as multi-dimensional people central to the plot of a story. So women's stories often don't get told and their power is subverted. It is the case that one quote-unquote fridged character would be sort of reborn. Barbara Gordon, Batgirl, she was shot and paralyzed and sexually assaulted, but then different writers gave her a new alter ego, Oracle, who is a brilliant team leader and a wheelchair user. But there aren't many portraits of disability in the superhero universe that are as nuanced as Oracle. Instead, characters with disabilities tend to be written as a super crip who has moved past their disability and done great things. And here's where characters with disabilities are often written similarly to LGBTQIA characters. Disability or gender or sexuality is sometimes written as totally defining that character, or the character is really struggling with it, or they're lonely, or they're alone all the time. However, we are now seeing fewer stereotypes and more LGBTQ characters and more characters with disabilities and more racially and ethnically diverse characters, some diversity in personalities and body types. We're seeing more female characters, period, especially in the last few years. And there are numerous factors for this. Broader gains of various civil rights movements, social media and more conventions that enable more communication between fans and creators, more films and downloadable TV shows and digital comics, trade paperbacks in bookstores and libraries, a network of women who work in comic shops, and a vocal backlash to those portrayals that I was showing you by some creators and fans who are then directing their voices and their dollars toward more diverse and multifaceted female characters. So these are some of those characters, the new superwomen of the universe. Here are some more. Surprise. And crucially, there are more female, more queer, more non-white writers and artists and editors and retailers. There are more characters written with nuance and complexity and care at Marvel and DC Comics, and especially outside of it, but although this new diversity has been described as a zeitgeist, we're talking about change that's really only on the margins numerically. The universe of superheroes remains overwhelmingly male and white, et cetera. Only 8% of superhero TV shows and 5% of superhero movies star women. Only 13% of the top 200 superhero comics star female characters or are written or drawn by women. Now, 5 and 10 and 15 years ago, it was half that number. So that's great growth percentage-wise, but the raw numbers are quite small. And most of the female characters and actresses and creators are still white, cisgender, heterosexual, able-bodied, et cetera. So it seems that for these big companies, marketizing diversity is profitable, but only to a point. The change is small so far, but even at that, it is being fought. Because moves toward equity and equality feel very threatening for some people, and these inequalities that I've shown you have been repeated across decades, and their repetition and their ubiquity makes them seem natural and normal, but they're not. So we need to support and produce diverse and authentic representations because there's power in storytelling, because representation matters, because superheroes matter. They can perpetuate injurious ideas about gender and sexuality and race and disability, or they can subvert those stereotypes in ways that empower people who have been marginalized because of them. So diverse and authentic representations benefit everyone because they show all of us that anyone can be a hero. Thank you.
So my name is Ariel Johnson, and I am the owner of Amalgam Comics and Coffee House, which is located in Philadelphia. I'm just going to kind of present a little bit about myself and just kind of some of the most common questions I get about opening the shop, why I decided to open the shop, and things like that. So I'm originally from Baltimore / Glen Burnie, so not far from DC. And I got introduced to Philly through college. I went to Temple University and really fell in love with the city, and so decided to make that my permanent home. So I've been there post-college for about 10 years. And I have always enjoyed superhero type things. I didn't start out with comics. I started out with cartoons. 80s kids, so He-Man, She-Ra, Thundercats, Transformers, like that was kind of my wheelhouse. And I actually got started reading comics in high school because I would borrow them from a friend. And when I graduated high school and moved to Philly for college is when I actually started my own collection because I did not have access to his collection anymore, so I had to take the plunge. And so the first question I always get is what got you into comics? That would be this woman right here. And the reason for that, as I said, I was a cartoon watcher, but in all of those shows that I named, there were no black women, and really no black characters other than Jazz and Panthro, but they weren't people. But I think most people, kind of figured it's I think they're supposed to be black, but still, without actually seeing a black body, without seeing a black human body. So, so I enjoyed those things, but before Storm, I always felt like I was watching other people's adventures play out, and so it was fun to watch, but I never really imagined myself in those roles. And I remember when I saw the commercial for the Fox 90s cartoon, And I just saw this black woman with white hair and white eyes, like flying around and throwing lightning. And I was like, I don't know what the X-Men are, but next Saturday I'm watching that. So she was my introduction to comic books, and she, changed my life in a lot of ways. And I think I could have very well grown out of my love of superpowers and superheroes and sword fights and all that had it not been for this woman. So the next question I usually get is, why'd you want to open a comic book store? So my story with comics, as I said, as far as purchasing my own, started in college because I no longer had access to my friend's collection and I wanted to continue reading. And I had toyed with the idea of going into a comic book store for a while, but I was really scared to do it because I was, a newbie. I really only knew about Storm. I only knew about her, through the cartoon. So my understanding of the X universe was all cartoon based. And I, being a woman, being black, going into this very white male space, I was scared. I didn't want to seem like I didn't know what was going on. I didn't want to be mocked or questioned or, you don't know 50 years of Batman's history, so you shouldn't be in here. So it was like a really scary thing, but, finally I just said, forget it, took the plunge. So my first comic book store was actually in Philly, Fat Jack's Comic Crypt. Still there, still love it, still try to get over there every once in a while when I can. And my general routine was I would go to the comic book store on Fridays after class as like a reward for a week of hard work or no work or whatever I was doing that particular week. And then across the street was this really dope coffee shop called Crimson Moon. It was owned by a young black woman. She was probably the same age that I am now, and everything about that shop was dope. You could just tell she had handpicked everything in there, from the murals in the bathrooms to the seating to the menu. And I just loved to like buy my comics and then go across the street and just sit and chill and read everything I read, like the community factor. Even though I very rarely spoke to other people that were there, it was something about geeking out in public that felt good. Like it was me like embracing who I fully was, not going home to like my nerd closet where I read by myself and I put everything away and I don't talk about it. And I'm sure when I was there, I probably had one or two conversations over like what I was reading. So I enjoyed that whole routine. So the coffee shop ended up closing. So the comic book store is still there. The coffee shop closed, and it was the loss of that space that gave me the idea for Amalgam, because, as I said, with her shop, it wasn't as simple as, find another coffee shop, because the environment that she created, I don't think I could have felt that at a Starbucks, right? So it's not just, just go somewhere else. So it just got me thinking. It was like, well, man, if the comic book store is the first thing I do, wouldn't it be cool if the comic book store was also that community space? What if I didn't have to find a space outside of like that geekdom realm to chill and like read and feel like I could be myself? So that was really like the beginning of the idea. And that was, I was, I think, a junior in college when I came, when that kind of came to my mind. So the next question I get is, why this neighborhood? I don't know who's familiar with Philly, but the shop is actually in North Philadelphia in the neighborhood of Kensington. It is a neighborhood that is, going through some change, going through revitalization or gentrification, however you want to call it, but it definitely has a stigma with it. Again, most people who know Philadelphia, kind of make a face or they try to rename it. People often come up to me and say, oh, your shop's in Fishtown, and I always say, no, my shop's in Kensington, which is, it's a very different thing. But I think, there are different types of people there. There are different elements there, but that doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. I think we can all learn from each other, from existing in the same space. So this is actually some images of Kensington. The one in the middle is the shop. It looks a little different now, but a very early picture of what the shop looked like, mixed with some images of, revitalization. The image on the top, I guess you're right, which is like a new, new in terms of the neighborhood. It's been there for a while, but like a pizza shop and ice cream parlor. And then some other images of like traditional Kensington. And so with the store, what I've really tried hard to do is to make it a place for everyone. Because as I said, like the coffee shop, the pizza shop and the ice cream parlor are really cool places. I go there, I enjoy the food there. But when you go in there and you look around, it's very white, it's very, hipster. It's clearly like the new people coming into the neighborhood, and you don't see, the longtime residents taking up space in those places. So I've worked really hard for the store to be a space for everybody. So it is the new people coming into the neighborhood. They're there, but also, we have Miss Ruth, who's lived in the neighborhood her entire life, and she comes in there and with her grandson, and we have high school kids that we're kind of their after school hangout spot, and we've, built relationships with them to the point one of our kids is going through a program to get into MIT, and he like ran in the store to tell us. So just again, we've become like this community space for the entire community, not just a select few, which I think is, again, really important as far as like opening up conversations and dialogues between different groups of people. So that kind of brings me into like the next question I get, which is, why such a huge focus on diversity? And this is why. Because if you Google superheroes, this is what you see. So you'll get, a plethora of white guys and like maybe a green guy. It's like green is fine, brown is problematic. I don't really get it, but that seems to be the thing. And again, as a Black woman who like loves the medium, all of these heroes here, I love them. And I'm not trying to wash them away, but it's like, I feel like we can also stand, people that look like me and others can stand alongside them. So for me, I want to see, more titles like this on the shelf along with the heroes, that we have all grown to know and love over the years. So, America's up there, Chakra, Faith, North Star, Kim and Kim, The Crew, which has been canceled. But I had to put this up there because that's the Firm album. The hip-hop cover, Tuskegee Heirs, which is an independent book, which is doing great things in the comic book world, I bought in Kenya. Another independent book. I'm blessed to know both of those creators, and they've been in the shop. Of course, Riri, Oracle, again, it's important for people to see themselves in the media that they're consuming, and it really does do something for your self-esteem. Like I said, for me, it was Storm. I think for the next generation of girls, the Wonder Woman movie. I'm a 34-year-old woman. And I start to feel a certain way when I see it, because again, it's just something powerful about seeing yourself in the lead, not somebody's backup, not somebody's love interest, or, a nameless, faceless character. You have a place. Your story matters. So, all of that has been my inspiration for really working to make Amalgam what I call a community geek space. So it is a comic book store, it is a coffee shop, but more than that, it's a place for people to meet and connect with one another, and we've worked really hard to do that. We've even had a civil rights leader, Congressman John Lewis, in the shop, which was a really, really beautiful experience. He also has a comic, if you didn't know, it's called March. Currently, it's up to 3 volumes. Again, it's just one of those things. It's like there are stories being told beyond, the white, cisgendered, heterosexual, male stories. It's like there are more stories being told, and I just really want to be a part of making sure those stories get out there and people know about them. So that is it in a nutshell. So thank you for listening. And again, this is, if you're not familiar with the shop, we're in Philadelphia, and here's our Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. So definitely follow us, and we hope to see you up there, and hopefully we'll be able to get you into comics if you're not already there.
Hi, I'm Gabby Rivera. Hello, my pronouns are hi. Hi. Hello. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I am so new to comics, and I just had this feeling that if I came here and I was like, dun, 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 I'm an expert, people would be like, no, you're not. Because it's something that you can't fake, right? And like, I just want to like kind of, whenever I'm talking to folks, like just bring it down to like who I am, what I'm about, and like, what better opportunity, right, to do that than at the Museum of Women in the Arts, right? Because I feel like the only reason that I'm here with all of you is because of women in my life. The support of women just across the board, right? From like my grandma and my mom and like just like family members, and then just like women in my life being like, you can do this, here, read this book, here, do that, right? And so that's where like my interest and my story is. It starts with like that support. But also, I wrote a book. I wrote like a little scrappy YA book called Juliet Takes a Breath. And that is it. Look at it. Everyone, marvel at it. And I'm not big on like flashy stuff. You know, I can barely use my computer at work. So we're just gonna do like pictures. But the thing about this YA novel, right, is that it's like so connected to how I came into like understanding communities of women. This book is very much based on like, someone timing me, I can go over. You time me, okay? All right, don't worry about it, guys. Okay, good. All right, so I was uncertain, right, in college of how I felt about politics or feminism or liking girls or any of that stuff. I just wanted to have a good time. And one of my friends was like, no, you have to be a feminist. And I was like, can I have a good time too? And she was like, maybe. So she puts this book in my hands, and I don't, again, no pictures, super low tech here. It's a book called Cunt by an author named Inga Muscio. So there's this book called Cunt in my hands, and I was like, I can't let my mom see this book. Ah! So I read the book and I'm like, oh my God, you can talk about your vulva in a book. What? Like, and just like, what this book brought to me was this understanding was that like the womanhood and the feminism and the things that my grandma and my mom had talked about in their own like ways, in their own cultural love language, right? This lady had put into like an academic book and was like gave me this kind of like new language, right? To talk about the things. And so I had this wild ass experience, right? Because I was so inspired by this book that I was like, white lady, I'm gonna find you and I am gonna be your intern, and that's just how this is gonna go. And she was like, okay, feminism, come over. So long story short, I go, my little Puerto Rican in the Bronx South, I go to Portland, Oregon. I meet this wild white lady who wrote a book named Cunt. And every night my mom's like, Nana, you okay? You alive? Did you eat some meat? No? Okay, go eat some meat. So it was like an amazing, phenomenal experience, right? And what happened was it laid the foundation for more community with women. I met queer women. I met queer women of color that were having babies with each other and like building houses and communes and growing like trees and flowers and stuff and like all of these things. Like, I'm from the Bronx. Like, if you have a garden, like, oh my God, that is a luxury. You know, like, if you can buy healthy foods, that is a luxury. I didn't even know what was possible. I didn't know you could be hippie and be brown, okay? So I see all of this, and then, again, women are like, you should write that. Women are like, you should write that. So I wrote it, and I don't know how to script to the next thing, but I did it! Okay. So oh, look, it's the author surrounded by all her books. But what is happening in this picture is I get published, independent publisher. this book, Juliet Takes a Breath, is like finally out of my computer and it's in the world. And again, what happens? Who is writing about it? Women are writing about it. Queer women are writing about it. Latinas are writing about it. I got no marketing. I got no promotion. This is my hustle making this happen, but it's also the community hustle, right? It is this moment where like my people are like, yes, we're gonna support this. This is a picture of books that came in because my base, my family, donated money so that I could then ship books that I bought to LGBTQ centers, to kids, to students, to families that couldn't afford to buy the book. Community folks came in and were donating money to make this happen. So it was super exciting, and it wasn't just me being like, hey, look at this wacky adventure that happened to me. It was also an opportunity to build in ways for people to talk about stuff, like the way that Kant had helped me find language to talk about stuff, right? Because sometimes, even when the language is there, it's maybe not accessible to you. Maybe Jack Kerouac isn't that reference that you're gonna get, but you're gonna get a Big Pun reference, you know? And why can't Big Pun be a part of a conversation of feminism, you know what I'm saying? So you better clap, I'm gonna wait. And so it's like putting models into the work, right? Like if I want to inspire young children, right, and boys, girls, non-binary children, just if I want to inspire children to be as like joyous and beautiful as they can be, right, then it's about putting models into the work. You know, speaking of women, my ex-girlfriend made these shareable quote graphics because the internet, and so. This is like one of those moments where I was thinking, like, if I'm gonna talk about stuff in my book, let's talk about homosexuality, let's talk about being gay. How can I do that in a way that feels authentic to me, that isn't necessarily rooted in shame or oppression or something really sad? Because like once I realized I liked girls, I was like, yeah. So this is that way to model, right? Like you can talk about things in a way that makes them a little less scary. So like being gay, right? Also being a feminist. That was something that was like terrifying to me because it either made me white or it made me not a woman or it made me like an ugly woman or something kind of wild that people make up about feminists. Like, you know, just because you're hairy don't mean you're ugly, you know what I'm saying? And so, but also, right, when you're building models, you have to, I felt like I had to also build a way for people to like have a conflict, right? So can you accept something like feminism? Can you grapple with it and also hold it in tension, but also want to be it too? That's what I felt like. I felt like, you know, even when I experienced really fantastic mentors, right? Like Professor Kelly Brown Douglas. We were talking about Kelly. Kelly's a black womanist theologian, Goucher College. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant human being. Inspired me in so many ways and was always able to push me to hold things into question, right? Can you be Christian and be queer? Can you be a feminist and still like, you know, be connected to your Latinidad? Can you still be Boricua? Can you, and how do you talk about those things? How do you talk about those things? And I think sometimes we're expected to always talk about them in a very serious way, and like that's super important. But how do we make it fun, right? And how do we build in the conversations into media and into art that's like exciting, right? So you're talking about feminism, but maybe the piece itself isn't rooted in that thing. So where it's like, okay, now I'm gonna talk about feminism, so I need my feminism book. Like, what is it like when you put that in a story? And so, on the strength and the excitement of women and queer people and women of color, black women, Latina women, writing about my work, supporting me, offering me couches to sleep on so that I could write, my parents offering me a place to live when I had nothing, because my book is also representative of 2 bouts of unemployment, a couple of people dying on me, and times where I had nowhere to go, right? So that support, that all of that somehow bubbled up into the ether, into the atmosphere. And then all of a sudden, I got an email from Marvel. And I was like, what? Marvel reached out to me, and Will Moss, the editor of Marvel, had read my book, and it was the first time that a white man, reached out to me about my book. And in that moment, you know, okay, that's a lie. In that moment, I like freaked out, called my mom, and I was like, Mama! Mama's Marvel Comics. Oh my God, I wish she was here. In that moment, I was just like, okay, so this little book that could has like flown on the wings of like women, and look, here we are, right? It's like bubbling up into this mainstream sort of situation that is like beyond me. Like, I feel like people are like, how did you get into comics? And I'm like, this energy found me, you know what I mean? Like this movement, whatever it is that everyone who has inspired me has like impacted and put into me to be able to tell stories, like that's how we get here, right? So this is America Chavez. Have y'all heard of America Chavez? She's gonna punch you in the face. Look at her. America Chavez. I did not create America Chavez. She's been around. She's like 6 years in the game. She's all Young Avengers, Team Brigade, a whole bunch of other stuff. They wanted a fresh voice for America. And reading Juliet Takes a Breath, they said that they found that like energy, that joy. And when they reached out to me, I was like super excited because like everyone's like, oh my God, Latina lesbian superhero. What? You put 3 things in stuff that we only have 1 thing. It would be 1 thing if she was a woman, okay? Another thing if she's Latina, but what? She's a lesbian? And so obviously she's gotten a lot of buzz, right? That's like, people are buzzing about that. And that's cool, right? And that's exciting. But there doesn't need, I didn't feel that there needed to be this like comic now where we are gonna center all of these identities in that way, where we're going to make a comic where it's like, well, now we have to talk about the lesbian thing and we have to figure this out. I wanted to be able to tell a comic that's about her being a superhero. And those other elements just come and flow in through her humanity. There's something that has of late just like exhausted me about feeling that every time I see representation, it is centered in oppression. Damn, that hurts, yo. It's hurtful. And that work is important, right? Like that, the bravery that it takes to unpack your identities. Via like dismantling like white supremacy and unpacking like the effects of colonialism and the diaspora and the slave trade, and that work is so necessary, right? And I feel like that work is the work that allows me to be able to tell a fun comic, right? That allows me, it's like the ancestors are like, okay, here you go. Ride the wave, let her fly, let her soar, let her punch through 50 million dimensions. And you can tell this story any way you want, because all of her identities are just gonna flow in anyway, because I am more than my identities. And if I am more than my identities, I owe her that. I owe her that so that she can have fun and be nuanced. And also what's exciting, and I'm almost done. I see you looking right there. She's got a good wink, y'all. And then, so then what also makes it fun, and the thing that is exciting to me, is that now I'm in a position where I get to learn so much. It's my first comic ever, and I am realizing that what I get to do is also take the media and the art and the thoughts and the feelings of women of color and queer people and put them into the work that inspires me and put them into America. And that is fun, bringing Lunella in, like doing covers like this, where I just feel like, you know, I was like, Beyonce's formation, from what I understand, is like a call to like the like excellence of blackness and black women. And so in my understanding of my identity as like Puerto Rican from the Bronx and like very much a part of a culture that like, that's my upbringing, right? Like salsa music, Latino stuff, but also very much Black American culture. How can I honor that? How can I honor so much of the work that's already being put out into the world via a comic? And so that's the exciting part, and that's what like visibility and representation mean to me. Thank you so much, everybody.
My name is Ashley Woods, or actually Ashley A. Woods. There's another Australian artist with a similar name. So Ashley A. Woods, and I am the artist for Niobe Shia's Life with Stranger Comics and Amanda Stenberg, and also Lady Castle with Boom Studios. And so growing up, my mother, she introduced me to comics and manga and video games. And although I did read comic books growing up, I'm more so familiar with manga and video games, and that's what primarily inspired me in my work, as well as my storytelling. So how I got started is way back in 2004, when I started college, I self-published my own fantasy novel called Millennial War, and it's kind of like a dark fantasy story. And so I self-published that. The way I found my way to do that is just basically word of mouth. My mom seen a article in the newspaper, the Chicago Sun-Times, and Wizard World Chicago was advertised, and we didn't know what a comic book convention was. And so she was like, yo, you need to go to this. And I said, okay. So I went. My mind was blown, and the very next year, 2005, I was cosplaying hardcore. Like I just like dove into it. So I kept up Millennial War from 2004 to 2009, took a quick hiatus and switched over to client work. And during that time, the comic book store, I self-published my book, and I was doing that low-key. So I wasn't really telling a lot of people about my book. And so I stepped into this comic book store in downtown Chicago called Graham Crocker Comics. And it was around the corner from where I was attending class. I was studying film, and I went to school at the International Academy of Design and Technology. So in between classes, I would go to the comic book store originally to buy books. And then eventually I wanted to have my own books on the rack. I didn't even know you can go into a store and just, off the bat ask somebody, can we work out a contract? But, sure enough, the guy, his name is Patrick, we're good friends to this day. He said, yeah, let's work something out. So he showed me, how they would take a certain amount off of the cover price, yada, yada. So my books are in the independent section, and it quickly became the most popular independent book in the store. So one day at school, I guess my classmates put two and two together, and they recognized my name. So I'm walking down the hall, and they was like, oh, I got your book in my backpack, and it was just like money in the air, and I was like, oh, So, I'm on the floor, I'm trying to, sign all these books and like collect all this money. And I was like, oh, okay, I can go I get some lunch today. And then like other times, like if I was tight on cash, I would go to the comic book store and see if I, sold any books. And, that's how I would, pay for books or get lunch or, what have you. So after issue 6, which was like the 7th book in the series, 'cause I started with issue 0, I started doing, local clientele work. And times was rough. I graduated from school in 2007, so I've been out of school for like 10 years now. And when I graduated, my teacher, Ron, he said that I couldn't have graduated at the worst possible time, because if you guys remember, 2008, that's when the recession hit. And so my personality, I'm a really hard worker, and I'm pretty stubborn too. I always felt like I can do what I want. I could do what I wanted, even though a lot of opportunities weren't, coming my way. It was just something that was instilled in me from an early age, and I was naive too. I think that played a role in it, So I had my first job at 12, working at a travel agency with a friend of the family. So basically holding a job constantly between 12 to 22, and then all of a sudden you can't find work. That affected my self-esteem. I fell into a deep depression. I felt suicidal. I just felt like I had no opportunity. I think opportunity is very important for people to keep going. Even if you're having a bad day or a succession of bad days or a bad time, that lasts for months or however long, I feel like as long as you have opportunity, you have hope, and that's like very important. To me, my hope was gone, so in many ways, art, did save my life. And, at that point, I stopped applying to jobs, and I decided to invest in myself, because I stopped looking at it. I stopped looking at things the way I was taught or brought up, typically in school, they'll say, you know, you want to do this and that, learn, you know, whatever, get this degree, and then go out and get a job. So I'm trying to follow this cycle, and you know, it's not making sense. I'm pretty sure we all have had that, you know, experience. You know, it's like a paradigm shift in your thinking. Like, you know, stuff isn't adding up. It's not, you know, making sense, everything I was taught. So I was pretty lost, but like, you know, that's when that stubbornness kicked in. You know, I'm like, I'm gonna keep going forward. I don't know how, you know, I can't see what it's gonna look like, you know, but just take it day by day. So I just kept doing my art, you know, and I started looking at things from a trade perspective rather than getting a job. So that basically led me to, you know, Niobe. And I went to a convention January last year in San Francisco. I had no money. I can't even tell you how much I had, but I had nothing. And I just, I just went with what little I had. I didn't even have a book to sell because I didn't even have enough to bring copies of my own book to the event. So I just had like a few prints. Long story short, Stranger Comics was there. I didn't even know who they were, but they've been around for a while. And Amanda was there as well. So I remember during the weekend, I seen Sebastian, who is the founder of Stranger and also co-writes Niobe with Amandla. I seen them on stage with her mother, and they were talking about Niobe, and I guess what they wanted to do with it, I'm not sure. I was passing by, and I remember thinking, like, man, I want to be a part of something like that, and I had no idea that they were actually scouting me. So during that same weekend, I'm sitting at my table. Amandla came to check out my prints, and it was just casual. You know, I'm drawing a commission, and I feel like a presence. So I look up, I'm like, yo, you know. And so I'm trying to play it cool, but I'm just like hyped, you know. But, you know, she's like, all right, this is nice work. She like casually flipping, and I'm like, fuck, you know. But, yeah, so I'm gonna start scrolling through just to like give y'all something to look at as I talk. These are like some of the covers. But yeah, so they was like, yeah, we need an artist. Well, okay, I'm going too fast. Basically, she said she liked my work. That's January 2 years ago, 2015. So Sebastian contacted me, you know, soon after, about, you know, 2 months later in March. I did some work for him, something different from Niobe. And then 3 months after that, in June, they contacted me about Niobe. So I flew out to LA, stayed out there for about a month that summer, and I worked on issue 1 of Niobe. And, you know, I'll tell you, like, anytime you're about to have a breakthrough, that's when the devil comes. Like, anytime, for real. Like, real talk, yo. Like, anytime you about to just make that breakthrough, that's when stuff just start, like, you know, falling apart. People start acting crazy, you know, because after a while, you know, I worked so much, I became almost like a hermit. I mean, I got a life, you know, and everything, but, you know, I became a homebody, you know, just so I can get some work done. And, you know, with that being said, you know, all of a sudden people just wanted my attention. I don't know why, but people started wanting my attention. Either it was positive or negative. You know, it's just stuff started getting crazy. It started happening to Sebastian too, and he started wigging out, and I was just like, yo, I got tunnel vision. I think you have to hit rock bottom before you know, get that motivation to realize your potential. Because you can know what you want to do, but motivation is a, you know, different thing. And also it changes over time. You have to pull from different sources over time. What inspired you at one point in your life, depending on what you experience, you may have to tap into something else within yourself to keep going. So Sebastian is like wigging out, like, you know, this and that is happening. And like I just told you guys, I told him, I said, it's the devil, just ignore it, you know. I call him Stanley, you know. Yeah. I'm like, I see you, Stanley, you know. But, you know, you just keep your composure. This is a variant cover I did last March. That's Harriet Tubman. But, yeah, like, So I kept him on track. I remember at one point I was working, I was, staying at this condo with one of the editors of the book. Sebastian came in, he was just like, oh, I can't take it, this and that person, they texted me some BS. And he was like, I need you to listen to me. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna keep drawing, but he's like, no, I need you to look at me. I'm like, I don't need my ears to draw. Like, I can draw. I'm like, okay, but in any case, it's cool because, we're all passionate, and I've had my emotional moments too where, sometimes it feels too much. And so, we've had each other's backs, throughout the project. It's a learning experience for all of us. I mean, yes, we're working with Amandla. She's the pro, the real pro, out of the entire team, because she's coming from a different background. But in any case, we've all had each other's backs, and we are realizing our dreams together. I got 1 minute left, so I'm gonna just rush. This is Lady Castle. This is some of the designs and concepts that I've put together for the book. It's about to wrap up with Boom, I wanna say next month with this 4th issue. Marinor, she's the king of the castle. So this is like a gender twist of a King Arthur, the typical King Arthur story. And basically all the men of the kingdom are killed off in battle. And Marinor, she becomes king because she's the only one who can pull the sword from this mystical figure in the lake, the Lady of the Lake. Ave in the middle, she's the princess of the castle, and she was actually locked up in the tower, and she chose to be locked up way longer than she needed to be because her father wanted to forcibly marry her off, and she had to choose between 2 different prisons. So at least being locked up alone in the tower, she can at least control some things about her life, very little. But and the last character is her younger sister Gwyneth, so she's pretty spunky. She starts off bratty, but you learn that she cool. She's just a kid. She doesn't understand, but she grows up. So these are other concepts. These are some pages. This is and the cool thing about Lady Castle is Ave breaks off into song like Disney. They just so. She's just having some type of psychotic, you see she's marking off days on the door, like how long she's been up there. She's like, I'm ready to go, This is Marinor. She's also a blacksmith, but this is her and her hut. It's not a hut, but that's the only word that comes to mind. But yeah, so this is Marinor and Gwyneth. They have a scene together. This is later on in issue 1 when they have their first battle without the men in the castle. Cover for issue 3. This is a short comic I did with Paul Allure. He worked on G.I. Joe and some other comics. So this is Past the Last Mountain. I did this for him back in October. It's like a one-shot, another fantasy story. That's my comic Millennial War, Niobe. It kind of squeezed in there. But this is my earlier work. So, really influenced by manga. The cast of Millennial War is really mixed and diverse. This is a Leela, which is a mystical being born of fire, and it's a chaotic type of legion, of supernatural beings. So, and then this is victims of police brutality. I wanted to do something to remember them because it's easy to forget who these people are. They're killing so many of us off. So I can't keep up, none of us can keep up with all of the victims, but I wanted to at least collect some of them and show them as humans. A lot of people don't see Black people as people, as Carolyn said earlier, they like to make us all animalistic and, whatever, but no, we people too, so I dressed them up, and yeah, that's it. I'm good, Lori? Yes. All right, cool.